Okay, so now let's move on to second question, which is, what are the major eschatological traditions out there and how do they converge? So before I go into the 6 major traditions, I want to remind everyone of 3 caveats. The first caveat is that within each religion, the eschatology is only a minority extreme view. Okay? Only a small minority of religious devotees will actually believe in the eschatology. That's the first caveat. The second caveat is that there's tremendous diversity within each eschatology. You can interpret the eschatology allegorically, which is to say that it's compelling you to a path of personal redemption and salvation in order to improve the world, or you can interpret it literally, which is that this is a true prophecy and everything in it will happen in order for the world to end or for the world to become a better place. Okay? And also, there are different sequencing of events and different interpretations in the eschatology. Okay? So that's the second caveat. Eschatologies within each tradition are very diverse. And the third caveat is that eschatologies are dynamic. And the reason why is eschatologies are in conflict, are in competition, in communication with different eschatologies. Think of eschatologies as stories that are trying to be the best possible story in order to capture the imagination of their believers. And to do that, they're going to incorporate the best elements from different eschatologies into their own. And that's why so many of these eschatologies, they follow a similar pattern because they've been learning and adapting from each other. Okay, so having said these 3 caveats, let's go into the 6 major eschatological traditions. And I'm going to focus on the most extreme version of each tradition because according to game theory, it's the fanatics who matter. It's the fanatics who are the most energetic, who are the most committed to achieving the eschatology. So the first eschatology is Zoroastrianism, which was the original eschatology. In the Zoroastrian tradition, the world is divided into good and evil, the light and the darkness, the truth and the lie. And at the end of the days, there'll be a final battle between these 2 cosmic forces. And as humans, we must choose which side to fight for. At the end of this battle, when good has triumphed, there'll be a day of judgment. Okay? And this structure, this cosmology, heavily influenced Judaism. And so in the Judaic tradition, because Jews have been persecuted for thousands of years, they believe that eventually a Messiah of war will come to them and he will lead the Jews to victory against all the enemies. He will reconstitute the nation of Israel and bring back all the Jews from the diaspora. He will build the 3rd temple and he will usher in the Messianic age of peace, prosperity, truth, justice. Okay? That's the Judaic tradition. The Judaic tradition went on to influence the Christian Zionist or the Protestant tradition. Okay? So the Protestants believe that the Messiah is Jesus and he's already come. So in order to usher in his second coming, certain conditions have to be met. First condition is the nation of Israel has to be reconstituted, and it was in 1948. Then the 3rd temple has to be built, and there has to be a war of Gog and Magog. The Antichrist has to appear. And once these conditions are met, then to save his people, Jesus will descend from heaven on a cloud, destroy all his enemies, and usher in a millennium of peace, truth, and justice before the final judgment. When Jesus returns, there will be a rapture where all Christians will immediately ascend to heaven. So that's the Christian Zionist Protestant tradition. And again, this is the most extreme form of that tradition. Then you have the Islamic tradition, which is based both on the Judaic and the Christian tradition. And it's very similar. So the Muslims believe that after an age of tribulation, when the world has turned its back on God, when the world is divided, a great leader will come to unify the people and lead the people to victory in the war of Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog is interpreted as the Antichrist, and Gog and Magog can be interpreted as maybe Western civilization for its materialism, but it could also be a certain force. So, for example, maybe the city of London. So that's the Islamic tradition. Then you have the Orthodox tradition, which is what we talked about in the last video. The Orthodox tradition believes that Moscow is a third Rome and has a destiny to restore the Byzantine Empire. And to achieve this destiny, Moscow will fight a war with Turkey. It will destroy Turkey and then return the Greeks to Constantinople, thus restoring the Byzantine Empire and thus unifying the Orthodox Christian world. Now, what's really interesting is that there is a geopolitical theorist named Alexander Dugin who's turned this eschatology into a master plan for Vladimir Putin to implement. If you don't know who Alexander Dugin is, you have to watch his interviews, you have to read his books, because he's probably the most important geostrategic thinker we have today. I'm going to put his videos and his books in the description below, so please make sure you spend the time to actually research him, because so much of what he says helps us understand the world as it is today and how the world would develop over time. So in 1997, Dugin published a book called Foundations of Geopolitics, where he describes this master plan for how Moscow can restore the Byzantine Empire. So what he understands is that for the longest time, whoever controls the seas controls the world, because most trade was done through sea. But in a time of nation states, in a time of railways, if one power can unite the Europe and Asian continents into the Eurasian continent, then that power can negate sea power and become the global hegemon. And that's why the British Empire are committed to two things. The first thing they're committed to is maintaining naval power. And the second thing they're committed to is ensuring that no major power would arise in the Eurasian heartland. And that's why the British basically provoked Germany into World War I, because Germany was threatening to be this power. And that's why Britain is now afraid of Russia, because Russia is trying to be that power to unify the entire Eurasian heartland. For Dugin, to unify the Eurasian heartland, what Moscow needs to do is, first of all, create the Berlin-Moscow axis to reconcile itself with Europe. It must also create the Moscow-Tokyo axis to reach out to Southeast Asia, and also to create the Moscow-Terrain axis to control the resources of the Middle East. And by building this alliance, what Moscow is doing is not only restoring the Byzantine Empire, but it's also restoring the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Empire. So Moscow sees itself as the heirs to both the Byzantine Empire as well as the Mongolian Empire. Now, Dugin thinks this is entirely possible because the Iranians, the Japanese, and the Germans all feel slighted, humiliated by the Anglo-American Empire. So if you give them a choice between sticking with the Anglo-American Empire or joining the new Russian Confederation, where they'll be giving more freedom, then they will opt for the Russian Confederation. So that's the grand plan. Now, obviously, the Anglo-American Empire is going to oppose this plan. And so for Dugin, what's important is to create internal chaos and dissent and conflict within America and within Britain to destroy the Anglo-American empire. And that's already happening right now because you have Brexit in Britain, and now you have this mass immigration, which is threatening the British identity. In America, you have Donald Trump, who is proposing America first. So all is going to plan. This plan also recognizes that both Turkey and China are also enemies to the rise of this Eurasian unification. But as we discussed in the previous video, Turkey itself is not very stable. It's kept together for the political maneuvering of Erdogan. Once he's gone, then all these ethnic tensions, these geopolitical tensions, these economic tensions that exist in Turkey will explode, and it will overwhelm Turkey, thus causing it to collapse as a nation state. It will lose its coherence as a nation state. Dugin is not worried about China as well. He understands that Russia and China can never be allies because China is too economically dependent on the Anglo-American empire. Basically, the point is Russia has nothing to offer China. China is basically a manufacturing economy which must sell its goods to the Anglo-American empire. Russia cannot absorb these goods. At the same time, there are a lot of internal contradictions in China. I can tell you, as someone who lives in China for many, many decades, China is not going to survive an economic catastrophe. It's not going to survive an ecological catastrophe. In fact, its economy is propelling the nation to an ecological catastrophe. China is overpopulated, has very little resources, and it imports 1/3 of its food. It imports most of its oil. These vaunted industries, EV, AI, rare minerals, they're all contributing to massive ecological destruction in China. I mean, you can say it's unsustainable, but you can also say these economic policies that destroy the environment, it's really suicidal. Okay, so China does not have a very bright future ahead of it. So Dugin's not worried about China either. Okay, so that is the master plan of Alexander Dugin, and again, it is based on the Orthodox eschatology, which perceives Moscow as a third Rome and perceives Vladimir Putin as the last czar, as this great unifier of the world. In Dugin's terms, Putin is the Katechon. Okay, the Katechon is a Greek word meaning the force that restrains the Antichrist. Okay, so for Dugin, Moscow has responsibility to be the force for civilization, for good, for God.